Servus YouTube, Chef here, this time with the final version of the Terror build. This is the absolute. We have pushed this build to absurd heights. I know I've said this about 10 times, but hands down this time I'm sure we cannot get any higher. Version 1 started off with 4k crits, then 6, then we had 8 and now almost 20k crits, because with all those builds I've made so far and all the knowledge I've gathered with all the different item, passive and attribute combinations, now everything is coming together to make this one overpowered build. We are pretty much taking the one thing out of all the other builds that made them good, and we use them all here. We discovered the full potential of the residual energy buff in our ranger build, we got our manic slaughter that we used to the mage build, and recently with the addition of the ailment build I realized how strong a model offering is. So what this build does is we use the residual energy buff that gives us in total with our gear 75% additional damage. I tested it again, we can have 2 rings with the same buff, both do trigger. And that buff gives us, depending on the spell we use, different damage types. Ice Spear with the Sacred Conversion to apply weakness, Winter's Grasp with Shadow Conversion to proc Curse, and the last spell, Ether Jump, because we can take the modifier Spirits of the Void to deal ether damage, that will proc residual energy and give us a chance to apply Stasis. And with all those ailments we buff ourselves with a model offering. For each stack of a different ailment we have applied, we gain 25% additional damage. This takes our total attack damage and adds 25% of the corresponding ailment damage type. And then we are using Mark of Impurity for a huge damage gain and also to make it more likely to apply afflictions. I have tried to use the unique belt, the Trial, to automatically apply the mark and use another spell to get yet another immortal offering buff, but it's overall a damage decrease since we miss out on the added flat damage you would get from any other belt. Since we have so many buffs that scale with our total damage, it's very important that we get our base damage as high as possible. Even only 20 added flat damage results in around 2k in the end. Since we take our flat damage, increase that with Manic Slaughter and any other damage increases like attributes or material damage, and then we get all those additive buffs like Residual Energy and Immortal Offering. I also want to mention that this build is extremely versatile. You could use any attack skill to deal damage and any other spell to transform your damage type, with the exception of Fire and Frost. Currently, Burn does trigger Immortal Offering, but it does not give you any damage whatsoever. It is bugged at the moment. And with Freeze, I never get the Immortal Offering buff, so keep that in mind. The reason why I chose the skills that I did is because of mobility. As you can see, I don't have to stand still to cast any of my skills, which in high champ level is a must, since anything would one-shot you. With that said, you don't need to do champion level, this is just a personal challenge and doesn't affect items quality or drop rate whatsoever. Alright, so with the introduction out of the way, let's go over the details in the items, skills, attributes and passive sections. Items. Weapon has to be either a dagger or a pistol to be able to cast Mark of Impurity. On stats we are looking for free flat damage increases, crit damage and free sockets. Offhand, the unique catalyst, the Magfest and Act for an additional residual energy buff. Rings with also another residual energy affix and preferably free flat attack rolls, crit damage and a socket. Belt with additional ailment stacks applied and also free flat attack damage, crit damage and a socket. Amulet with the same stats as all the other accessories and depending on which difficulty you play, either ailment stacks applied for low level grinding. Since we will be one-shotting enemies at that level, we want to immediately apply all 5 stacks needed for the Immortal Offering buff. And Pierce for high champ, because it takes a few shots to kill enemies, applying ailments shouldn't be an issue. Gloves and shoulders with increased material damage, rage and willpower cost reduction and ferocity. If you drop gear with wisdom on it, that is okay as well, since we would otherwise spend a few points in it to apply ailments more easily. Chest and helmet, as always with the Manic Slaughter affix, this is the highest damage increase in the game, highest roll on it is 9%. And if you can, we are also looking for either ferocity or wisdom and transfer time reduction, but getting 9% on Manic Slaughter is the most important. Hands with transfer time and cooldown reduction, as well as ferocity or wisdom, and preferably with at least one socket. And boots with move speed and ferocity. Gems. In offensive slots we want anything with flat damage, so either Aetherite, Silverstone or Sapphire. Highest roll on these are 8 to 12. Offensive slots with 1 Sapphire for some leech, others Copperstone, those only matter for low level grinding though, since on the higher difficulty we get one shot anyways. And support slots with Silverstone, since the total 40 attributes we get from that are more damage than the 20 primary attribute from other gems. Skills. Like I said in the intro, any attack skill is viable since we can proc residual energy on any of those. You can see in the top right if it's an attack, and if you either need the dagger, which also counts as a melee weapon, or the pistol to be able to cast it. I'm using the turret skill because it has the highest mobility with the modifiers Caliber, Twin Repeater and Ballistics for more DPS, and autonomous sensors for utility. For high champ levels, other viable skills are Arrow's Wheel, Blade Storm, Gunslinger's Brand, or Havoc Orb. They all have good damage and decent mobility. And with the spells as well, choose the one you prefer. I'm going with Arctic Spear with the modifier Beauty of Hope to transfer it into Sacred damage, and Ominous Chill to proc the ailment more often since the weakness stacks themselves also increase our damage. Crystal Javelin for more damage. The Ice Spear also deals decent damage and I spam them to stay at maximum range. And Boon of the Usurper to spam it even more often. You could use Comet Ballista instead for more damage, but then they are harder to land. Next one, Winter's Grasp with Concentrated Shadow to convert it into Shadow to apply Curse. Ice Pawn to spam it more often. And Hilda Ice Queen for a small additional damage buff. And the last spell, Ether Jump with Spirits of the Void, so it procs our residual energy buff. And March of the Time Devourers, this makes the skill very smooth to use. The other modifiers are Preference, I'm going with Fragments of the Ether and Escape Artist. And the final skill we are using is Mark of Impurity. We gain a lot of damage with the modifiers Target Eliminated and Big Game Hunting. Minimal resistance makes it easier to gain our Immortal Offering buff. And Guild by Association makes it so we only need to apply it once per enemy group. We can also use other spells to get different residual energy buffs with the exception of Burn and Freeze, since those don't work with Immortal Offering. Options are Annihilation with either Stasis or converted into Toxic for Poison, Consuming Embers converted into Lightning for Shock, or Thunderstrike for Shock or Curse. Attributes. Our primary attribute is Ferocity because of the increased crit chance, so we want to put as much into that as we can. Each point in the primary attribute gives a 0.5% increased damage. And our secondary attribute is Wisdom, so it's easier to proc our Immortal Offering buffs. I'm going for around 20% chance to apply an ailment, but feel free to go higher or lower if you prefer. Secondary attribute gives us 0.4 increased damage per point. The highest and second highest value on your attributes decides if it's your primary or secondary. Passives. Starting off in the Soldier, grabbing every crit damage node in the area and the major node the wildcard. Crit chance. Going down into the Cabalist, picking up Immortal Offering. Like I said, this does not work with Burn or Freeze. I'm not going for Grievous Inflictions because Immortal Offering adds damage from any buff we gained, so our second highest damage type will only be the one where we already gained an Immortal Offering buff from. But since we could then refresh our Immortal Offering buff, this would be a good choice if you struggle with keeping all the buffs up. I also tested Insidious Decay, so I could free up an accessory slot, but the damage buff seems to be multiplicative. When I used this, I had a huge damage loss. Next up, 1 point to the Scholar to get into the Assassin's Tree for Merciless Lethality. Continuing into Scholar Tree, picking up increased maximum reach. And Attrition Strategist for increased ailment chance. Into the Praetorian to get the 2 crit damage nodes in there. 1 point into Sentinel to get into the Warlock Tree. Picking up residual energy, this buff is scaling with our attack damage, not spell damage, which I always thought was phrased weird on this note. The way I read it, I would always think it would take the percent from your spell damage, but it does not. And the last few points spent in duty to exterminate for even more maximum range. And that's it for this guide. I can't believe how strong this turret build has gotten. Leave me a like if you appreciate the Wolcen content. These builds take a long time and effort to make. Also, I hope I earned your subscription. More builds coming in the future. If you got any other questions, feel free to hit me up in the comments or on our Discord. I'm currently live on Twitch right as this video goes up. Would be glad to have you over there. But as always, I'll leave you with more gameplay. Servus, YouTube.